Well, I'm delighted to say that Adam McConnell, a professor of history at Sabanci University, joins us now in the studio to discuss more about this. Adam, thank you very much for coming in on this, I suppose, historic evening for Turkey. It was certainly historic 12 months ago. Turkey has seen a number of coups throughout its history. How and why was this one different?
Well, the main reason that this one is different is because the military in the past, for example, in 1960 and 1980, it was definitely coming from the hierarchy of the military. They were the ones who carried out this coup. But last year, it was a group that was inside of the military. Of course, you've been talking about the Fethullah Gulen organization. It was his adherents, both inside the military and also outside of the military, who organized this coup attempt. So, in fact, and also politicians and officials in the government have tried to make this a very clear point. The people who carried out this coup last year were people who were dressed in military garb, but were not actually soldiers. In fact, there were incidents where people who had been, for example, expelled from the police in the past 3 years because of their connections with the Gulen organization, they showed up, for example, in tanks on July 15th last year, or in personnel carriers. So it was not a situation in which the military itself carried out the coup. It was a faction within the military who used their positions within the hierarchy, their positions of authority to give orders to, of course, soldiers who didn't know what was going on to try to carry out such an event.
I know 12 months as a historian, it's no time at all to judge the impact of history, but bearing in mind everything that we've spoken about in terms of the civil service and the number of people that have lost their jobs, and also the political atmosphere within Turkey now, how do you think July the 15th, 2016, what impact is it going to have on Turkey's future over the next 5 years, let's say?
Well, because I'm a historian and have a historical perspective on this issue, I see this as a trend which is going to, little by little, create more transparent, more democratic, meritocratic state institutions. Because this is exactly what Turkey had suffered from for the past 90 years. State institutions were not democratic. They were not focused on providing services to the Turkish people, to Turkish citizens. And only in the past 10 years, first was military tutelage finally removed from state institutions. And then, of course, the fact that state institutions had not been democratic previously had made it possible for Fethullah Gulen to, little by little, over a very long period of time, to infiltrate his people into the various state institutions. And this is what was finally ended last year. So now that we have these groups that had infiltrated this group that had infiltrated itself into the state institutions, little by little being removed from state institutions, I see this as a positive step towards democratizations, and I expect this to continue in the coming 5 years.
And from a historical perspective as well, let's talk about Turkish, because there are divisions politically, whether it be social, religion as well. Can you just contextualize for us where some of those fault lines have been over the last 50 years or so in Turkish society?
Over the past 50 years? Well, of course, for example, with the previous commentator, you had mentioned the referendum. Well, a referendum is a specific type of, it's not even an election, it's asking the voters to give just a simple yes or no response about a certain political issue, in this case, changing an aspect of the Constitution. So a referendum may not actually be a good barometer of what's going on in a society. In fact, I think Turkish society is not as divided as many people outside of Turkey think it is. On the other hand, of course, there are many different groups in Turkish society because Turkey is a very diverse society. And only once you get into Turkish society do you see that there are dozens of different languages, different ethnicities, also different religious groups. But one thing that I've seen in the past year is that the coup attempt and the response by Turkish society to it has provided a unifying principle for this collection of very diverse groups that make up Turkish society. And again, I see this as a positive thing. I think that this will help unify Turkish society in the coming years.
So the referendum that you mentioned, where it was almost perfectly divided, 50, I think it was 51-49, maybe 48-52, but very, very close as well. There have been, of course, over the years, these divisions. You think that actually events of, I suppose, the last 12 months, really, from the coup and now the constitutional change as well, is propelling Turkey to perhaps a more unified future?
I think it's propelling it towards a more unified and more democratic future, because in the past, one of the things that was lacking in Turkish politics was a unifying ideology. The state ideology that had been present for the past 90 years, there are various terms that are used for it, like Kemalism or Ataturkism. In terms of ideology, it was actually very weak. It didn't provide a mental outlook for the people in the society. And an event, an extremely traumatic event that all of Turkish society took part in, such as this foiling this coup attempt last year, can provide that sort of unifying principle. And also the focus on democratization provides more of a unifying ideology.
Okay, fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very much, Adam McConnell, for coming in and talking to us here on TRT World.
My pleasure.
Thank you.